and welcome everyone to Rockin' Radio. This is the beginning of a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. We've been here for 6 seasons, and this is the 31st episode of season 6. And of course, we're here to talk about your Missouri Tigers. I am your host, Snelling. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see me on your left. Please take a moment to hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. With me this week is the other Matt, Matt Watkins from just down the road 170 here in St. Louis, representing the Blues again tonight as they is the NHL season. That's over, right?
Oh, no, the Blues season's over, but the playoffs are just beginning. They're pretty well matched.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. The Blues have done. That's right. Pretty sure the playoffs. I knew the playoffs were going. Unlike some, I am completely engrossed in all things Portal, and only things Portal. It is that season. It is Portal season. Since you last joined us, we've had quite a bit happen. Since we last recorded, we've had quite a bit happen. So last week, Matt and I talked about Jamar Bates, sort of like what he is as a basketball player and all those things. Since then, we've had Kadin Shedrick, arguably Mizzou's top target that we know of. I always like to emphasize that part because we're pretty sure that he was their top guy. He came on campus for a visit and all. He commits to Texas, so he's out. Matthew Cleveland, who we kind of thought was maybe not really attainable, showed up in Columbia, and now he's Missouri's squarely in the mix for him. Missouri did get a commitment from Kaleb Brown, the Iowa State transfer. A lot of things going on. So, Watkins, why don't we start with this Shedrick situation? Because very clearly it is problematic. The one thing that I think we all were hoping for is that Shedrick would arrive in Columbia and love everything about it and commit to the Tigers and be their starting center next year. Instead, he's going to team up with Dylan Dessou and Rodney Terry in Austin. What was your initial take on that one?
Surprised, but probably not too surprised. I mean, Texas is a good program. They were in the Elite Eight this year, won the Big 10 or Big 12 championship in Kansas City. Obviously, they had a little problems off the floor with their head coach, but they've rectified that in some ways and hired their interim to be full-time, Rodney Terry. So, yeah, I would say I was a little surprised because I knew Mizzou was hard after Shedrick. So, it's early in Dennis Gates' tenure. It's not too often that we've heard that he's really after a guy. A lot of the commitments have been, especially in the portal, have been, oh, holy, we've got a bat signal here. What's going on? We have no idea who this is about. But with Shedrick, we knew Mizzou was in his top 30, top 20, top 5. They were getting a visit. Big need for the program, and obviously didn't work out for him. So, yeah, I would say that I was a little surprised because I thought Mizzou was in good standing there. But again, considering the competition, Texas is also in need of a man in the middle. So, I wouldn't have put it 50-50, but I'm not shocked that it went out in the way it did.
Yeah, a lot of these transfer portal type recruitments are kind of hard to, get a full picture on. With the high school kids, it's their kind of first time going through it. They're trying to kind of embrace the process and sort of live it up a little bit. And I think for those reasons, there tends to be more like free flow of information. And without that free flow of information, because transfers, I think, are always a little bit more reserved. They've gone through the recruiting process. They know what they're looking for more in a program than they did coming out of high school. So, they're grizzled veterans, for lack of a better term. I got the Georgia down here trying to nest. George, just lay down, sweetie. Okay. But these guys, like they essentially they know what they're looking for, and so it tends to be quieter, and it's harder to get kind of like a clear read. With Shedrick, I know when he hit the portal, he was the guy that, like, the three of us, you, me, and Matt Harris, were all like, look, this is a guy who's perfect for Missouri. He's 6'11", protects the rim well. He didn't quite get what we thought was a fair shake. I think what a lot of people thought was a fair shake under Tony Bennett. And not to question Tony Bennett at all, because he's clearly a great basketball coach. He's won a national championship and all that kind of stuff. But definitely a guy who I thought was talented. Everything that you wanted out of a center. 6'11", can run the floor, block shots, rebound, defends, can defend all over the floor. Perfect fit for Missouri. So we like earmarked him, and then essentially you sort of watch these cut downs happen. You don't really have any idea like how in the picture Missouri is, but they made the first and second cut down, all kind of stuff. And, and then you start, once it starts reaching that point, you start kind of tapping, different sources and trying to figure out like how serious this thing is. And everything that we heard back was that this was a very serious courtship. Like, Dennis Gates was front and center, and really seeking Shedrick and wanting Shedrick to be a part of the Tigers. I'm sure, look, all coaches lose recruiting battles at some point, but it does sort of feel like, the public nature of it. It does sort of seem like this is like the first real time where like Dennis hasn't gotten his guy.
Right. And the thing is, as you just mentioned, being public, we don't know that there haven't been these guys before that were just flying under the radar. Coaching staff really wanted him during the portal season. They brought him in for a visit. No one knew. He committed elsewhere. We don't know if that ever happened. Obviously.
Well, right, because like even like you bring up that host, like the John Tonje situation, like we had no idea he was on campus. We had no idea like Nick Honor made it to campus, and those guys are showing up in commitment shots with full Mizzou gear, like they were on an official visit. So, it is sort of tough to read.
I mean, it's entirely possible, using a guy like Tonje for an example, that if he visited Mizzou one weekend, didn't commit, goes to Creighton the next weekend, commits, we never found out that he was at Mizzou. That's entirely possible. Obviously, it didn't work out that way to Mizzou's benefit, but the information that flows during the portal is just hard for a lot of the reasons you said, that guys know what they're looking for. And then when you compound that recently with the transfer portal really taking off during the onset of COVID back in 2020, 2021, so much of this stuff is done via Zoom. So you can't track that, someone's going to see a guy on campus, which I believe is how the public found out that Matt Cleveland was on campus, is that someone saw him at the rec center.
Yeah.
There was no source there. There had been rumblings that he may be visiting. I've heard them. Other people have heard them, but the actual
we got word that that Mizzou was working to get him on campus.
Right.
But I was under the impression that it was going to happen like this week and not last week. So
the fact that someone actually laid eyes on him physically, that's a lot different dynamic than trying to track down who the coaching staff is Zoom visiting with, because you can't. So that's something that's hard. And then also a little bit difference with NIL now is that you can have a fairly traditional recruiting situation in the portal, but you have to throw in the free agency aspect of it too, that we don't know how much for certain players money is playing a role into it. And we also don't know how much one staff gives an offer to a player. I shouldn't say the staff, the collective, whatever's above board in the state. And then they go and bounce that off of another collective at another school and see if they'll match or exceed. I don't know if that's happening. That's what happens in pro sports free agency. Who's to say it's not happening here? And I don't know if that happened here with Shedrick. I have no inside information on that whatsoever, but that is a factor that can make great visits not materialize into commitments. So, there's just a lot of new factors in the recent years that make this kind of a hard but interesting thing to follow.
It's fascinating to follow, and I will kind of echo like the NIL side of it. It makes so much of this really, really difficult to talk about because there's this giant unknown of like what factor is NIL playing. We've been under the impression that Mizzou is in good shape with a lot of the NIL stuff. They worked hard to kind of make sure that they have a strong representation. But you still don't know, okay, like there was some account that was throwing around that like Hunter Dickinson is possibly getting like $2 million offers from Kentucky and Kansas. And there's a lot of respected reporters people that are plugged in, thinking of, what's the Kentucky athletic writer?
There's a few.
Well, yeah, like, I've got like on my tweet deck, I've got like a non-Mizzou kind of sports stuff feed.
Right.
He's on there a lot, but he basically called out that report and said it's ridiculous.
Right.
And so but do we really know? I mean, I assume if he's calling it ridiculous, then $2 million is probably too much to expect somebody like Hunter Dickinson to get. But what is the expectation? Like we had heard, $500,000, $600,000 for Kaleb Love, and it's just like, okay, like, is that real? I don't know if that's real. So is Missouri offering somebody like Shedrick like $250,000, and Texas is offering him $400,000? Well, yeah, I mean, like that's a sizable difference. Like, and again, like this is me just like tossing out random numbers. We have no idea what any kind of NIL such stuff was like playing a role, or if it even played a role. Like, and that's another thing is, I mean, there are guys who come from families where money isn't a concern.
Right.
And obviously, like, I'm not talking about somebody today's Josh Kroenke or something like that, but more just kid from suburbs, family at home is doing all right, so he's just going to put himself in the best basketball situation. The one that he believes is going to have him the best longer term earning situation, so that the team that can maybe help him become a pro better. Versus like we also know that there have been guys in Missouri's recruiting where NIL is going to be a big factor because they don't have that situation at home, and where them earning as much money as possible right now is at the very top of the list, to try to help alleviate anything that's going on at home. And so like these are all things that are happening, but they're really difficult to report on and really difficult other than just like some rumors here and there, which are completely unquantifiable. So it makes following all this incredibly difficult. The end result, though, Missouri did not get their big man.
They did not.
They did get another guard. So on Thursday, it was Thursday, right? I'm like losing track of all days.
It was.
Kaleb Brown committed. And he was a guy who they had on campus. They felt really good about how it went. They thought they had him. And then he left. And he went to West Virginia. And everyone's just like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like maybe he gets to West Virginia, likes that, and decides to commit. He did not. Came back around, commits to Mizzou. Watkins, what are the Tigers getting in Kaleb Brown?
I think he will be a fan favorite, just knowing who prior fan favorites were at Mizzou.
He's got a little Sutherland in him, is what you're saying.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit of Jordan Geist. Different type of player than Jordan Geist, but the same. Um, throw out all the common descriptors for a 6'3" white guy. But no, seriously, he plays with an edge. He's you watch some of his games, and he's I won't say it. I'm not going to call him a dirty player. He's not that, but he's not going to back down. If there's a physical confrontation, he will be in it. And I really think that obviously keeping that in check is important, but having something like that on your team is important. Um, there are going to be nights when things aren't going well. We saw that last year, even though Mizzou was a very good team, but having a little bit of distemper on your team is something that I value. I know I've talked with you all about this. Like, I would really like this guy if he just played a little bit more pissed off. uh, you know, and obviously you want to keep that somewhat in check. We've been watching Draymond Green in the NBA playoffs, and maybe he's keeping it in check. I don't know if there's a whole lot more that he has to offer in that category, maybe. But there is some value in that. So that's one impression, and it's certainly not the most important, but he's a very good perimeter defensive player, I think, which is something that the staff valued and they should value. Last year, defense struggled across the board, but being able to keep guys out of the lane is important. Obviously, coming from Iowa State, they're very good at that. That is what they pride their defense on. I mean, it's called the no middle for a reason, the middle being the lane, keep people out of it. And they do it incredibly well. And if you watch any amount of film, you'll see that Kaleb Brown was very good at that. Mizzou will be playing a different system, but a lot of the techniques and skills are translatable defensively. So that's probably my main takeaway. Obviously, he's a good shooter on offense. He's not what I would consider a real versatile offensive player, but he's very good at what he does. A lot of spot-up attempts, a lot of catch and shoots. He can attack off the dribble if guys do the flyby, which we saw some examples of that with Mizzou's defense last year. But it's a pretty simple game, but also very effective. To have a guy like that has those three qualities, both offensively, defensively, and a little bit of I don't know how to call it. Has the right attitude. We'll call it that way.
Right.
I think those three things are very valuable in what can be a rotation player.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of those things. I do think that it's beneficial for a roster to have one of those guys who plays with an edge, who's not afraid to kind of mix it up. A guy who is almost always first to the floor. I also think one of the things that, and I think this kind of probably speaks to some of, some inherent racial biases with media members, but essentially assuming because a guy is 6'3" and white, he's just this scrappy player, but Grill's a good athlete. He's a very good athlete. He defends well because he's a good athlete. He can move his feet well. He was hampered a lot middle of last year through the end of the last year, up until he got kicked off by his back issues. But if you go back and watch Grill, as a sophomore, as a junior, what you saw was a guy who is very athletic, and why he's a good defender is because of that. I think he's going to fit well in this team. I think that I like the addition of sort of him and Tamar Bates roughly at the same time because of what they bring individually that sort of complements each other, because I think Tamar Bates is a little bit more high ceiling. He's a guy who is going to be a little bit more versatile offensively. But they're both really good defenders. And, as we saw, this team had no trouble scoring last year. And I'm anticipating that, Dennis Gates is going to put together another very good offense this year. But having just a little bit of defense, a little bit more grit, out of your guards, I think will take this team a little bit further in maybe some of those games where they are playing their best offense.
Yeah, I think a lot of shouldn't say the descriptions, but there's some similarities in what Kaleb Grill brings to kind of the leadership on the court, first to the floor, as you mentioned, aspects that Trago Million brought this past year, and we saw throughout the course of the season that when they missed that was a big thing. I mean, he wasn't one of their top scorers. He wasn't ever leading the team in minutes, but he gave you valuable minutes, even if he wasn't scoring. And I think that's something that Grill can do. And I guess I would just, to further my point, check out the tweet I shared, the video I shared of after Kaleb Grill's commitment, where he hit a big three against Texas of all teams and then signaled timeout to the Texas sidelines that they needed to call one, and they did not, and the run continued. But I guess I don't really know how to describe that in one word, but just that aura of him is what I think of. So,
yeah, and it'll be helpful on next year's roster. I think I sort of mentioned in our chat that I sort of saw like a lot of similarities between him and Gamillion. I think the usages are probably going to be similar. Although I think Grill's much more of a catch and shoot guy, and Trey was definitely much more of a driver slasher type. But a lot of like the similar as far as like what their role is going to be in the offense is not going to be the primary focus. They're going to be, the guy kind of hopefully finishing a play or, making the extra pass, getting in an open corner three, those kinds of things versus, with Bates, I think what you hope is he's able to kind of take another step offensively and kind of, be a secondary scorer based upon who he's playing with, whether, Kobe or, Isaiah Mosley come back. And then you can sort of, pair him with those guys. He can help them, with some late clock motion and stuff like that. So overall, pretty good situation so far, other than the whole Shedrick part. Trying to figure out where Mizzou goes from here and what they're going to try to do. They very clearly want a big man to sort of finish off this class. I think the pursuit of Cleveland is going to continue. He's reportedly going to Auburn this week. That'll wrap up his visits. He wants to decide pretty quickly after that. I mean, we're already at late April. He wants to have a decision made before spring classes come to an end, which I believe for him is like May 5th. So it's entirely possible by, this time next week that we know whether or not Matt Cleveland is going to be a Missouri Tiger or not. Whether he is or not, obviously adding a wing with his type of ability is great. Like, that's fantastic. Watkins, what are they going to do about starting center? Are we going to, is it going to be Noah again?
This is nothing against Noah Carter. I think he's a very valuable player, but I hope that we're talking about someone who can allow Noah to play in a more traditional role for himself, and not have to be tasked with being a 6'6", 6'7" center, which in certain lineups can work. But I have to believe, with how hard they went after Shedrick, it's obvious they want a big. Dennis Gates even spoke about it in his press conference, 2 weeks ago, that he's not looking for just size, he's looking for the right type of size. All that being true, you have to have a little bit more than what we've got on the roster, because last year we were a very, very undersized team. And who were the two primary interior players? Mohamed Diarra, who just committed to North Carolina State University, And Kaleb Brown, who yesterday declared for the NBA draft, obviously he retained his eligibility and his right to come back and play another season. But you take those two guys off the roster, and last year's team looks really small. And did bring in some freshmen. Butler is a center-ish player. I think he's a little bit more versatile than a traditional center, but he's got size. He's 7 feet tall. Trent Pierce, another big wing, stretch forward type guy. But I don't think if you're building a team to win next year, you're relying on them taking significant minutes at your 4 and 5, or what would traditionally be considered the 4 and 5. I know we need to kind of move away from those designations, but the interior, we'll call it. I don't think that the answer to that question is currently on the roster.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a situation where they certainly are hoping to get minutes at the 4 and the 5 from both Trent Pierce and Jordan Butler. I think I do the same thing a lot of people do. Like, I'm constantly referring to Jordan as his brother, Jonathan. So I think they want minutes from them, but you don't want to count on those minutes from them because, the learning curve with some freshmen, unless you're just a truly elite guy. And as much as I love this recruiting class, I don't think you consider these 3 truly elite players. Like, these are all like potential long-term pieces that have pro potential. I'm probably the highest on Trent Pierce, but he's also more of like a 3-4 versus a 4-5. I think, with Butler, you get that 4-5. But what it basically like boils down to is you want somebody with some experience to be able to come in and help you protect the rim. The name that a lot of people are going to associate with Missouri at this point is Jamarian Sharp. Missouri was burned by Sharp last year. When we were kind of talking about NIL stuff, I think there was some importance for him to be able to kind of mentioned earlier, like wanting to make sure he's earning top dollar with his NIL deals. So it may not be the right fit right now for Missouri and Jamarian Sharp. With that said, I mean, I don't think you completely discount it. I just think that based upon what we've seen with how they've approached post players in the portal, they're looking for something that maybe Sharp doesn't provide. He definitely provides rim protection, but he's also been, I think you even alluded to this on one of the previous podcasts, some loose coaching. Is how we'll define it. So his couple years at Western, he didn't really develop a way like a lot of people maybe wanted him to. And so if it's not Sharp, then really like who is it? Like, we've only got, I think, one other name on our tracker, and the tracker is basically like what we know and has been reported that Missouri has reached out and contacted players. It doesn't mean that there aren't others already out there. And the way things are these days, it's very likely that they've already reached out to somebody or at least someone's camp who maybe isn't currently in the transfer portal. I just like, I at this point, I know, Matt Harris is worried about the number of guys that are still out there and left that may need a waiver. Even if you're just trying to get a body, I just don't know where they're going to go unless it's somebody that is not in the portal right now, and the portal's still open for another couple weeks.
May 11th, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, Mizzou's in an interesting situation. I know I had mentioned this to you all, but they are a prime opportunity for players, or more importantly, their family slash representatives slash camp. Um, Mizzou is a team that desperately needs something and has NIL funds to pay for that something. Um, And if a player is wanting more NIL funds at his current school, what better way than to have his family reach out to another program's NIL fund and see what they can get from him? And what better place to, or what better NIL fund to look at than one that has absolutely nothing on the roster resembling a big man? Um, it's kind of a market situation here that Mizzou is in desperate need of a certain something, and it doesn't take an economist to figure out what people will do to take advantage of that. And I'm not suggesting the zoo will get taken advantage of, but there's going to be a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. And I would almost go as far as saying there is stuff happening behind the scenes about post players, big men, whatever you want to call them, reaching out about Mizzou's situation, because Mizzou will have money to get that guy, and whoever that guy is will be able to play a lot of minutes at Mizzou. So, whether that materializes into anything or not, I don't know. But the whole dynamic of the transfer portal in the days with NIL being above board, it really changes, because it used to be that guys were paid under the table and there were certain programs who did it and certain programs who didn't. Now everyone is able to do it if they've got a fund set up. So why wouldn't you make a call and see what a program's willing to pay for you? That's just simple business. And Wazoo just happens to be in desperate need of something. And, that's a bad spot to be when you're the buyer, but a pretty good spot when you're the seller. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I would say the next week is going to be pretty important in that, to see what manifests, considering it did appear that Kadin Shedrick was Mizzou's top target there and they didn't get him. So we'll see what happens this week. Might be premature to say who it is or where he's going to come from, but I would imagine there's something that materializes.
So we do know that there has been at least some amount of contact with the former Vanderbilt post player, Quentin Brown. Brown was originally played at Rice, transferred to Vanderbilt. He is sort of like the quintessential serviceable big. Like he's a smart player, 6'10", I think. Not an elite athlete, but I would say he's good at using his body. He's a strong kid. I think if you end up in a situation where, like, the worst case scenario is you're signing, instead, but I think if you're signing a guy like Quentin Brown, you're getting probably 18-ish minutes versus maybe, with somebody like Shedrick, you're probably getting 25 to 27. I think with the way that, Dennis Gates is trying to structure his roster is he really wants to have more depth than they had last year. And then if you have that more depth, then the likelihood that you're playing guys more than maybe 30, 32 minutes a game is pretty low. And that way you're able to kind of cycle in more bodies. Right now, the guard situation looks fine. I think they'll be able to get pretty deep with their guards. The interior, though, like if it's somebody like Muller Brown, then that basically is creating probably a 20 to 22 minute section of the game where you are probably going to have to be playing with guys like Noah Carter or Jordan Butler, or Kobe Brown at the 5. And I don't really think that's the ideal situation that they want.
Yeah, and I think a big thing, kind of the elephant in the room, so to speak, is that we just don't know who's coming back on Mizzou's team. Kobe Brown, if he were to return to next year's team, having a serviceable big man like Brown, who you just mentioned, Melora Brown? I don't
Laura
want to
Brown.
confuse. We'll call him Quentin. How's that? Well,
Yeah.
you take a guy like
UFB.
you take a guy like that, and all of a sudden your roster doesn't look that bad because you've got Kobe Brown on it. Same thing with a Matt Cleveland. Same thing with an Isaiah Mosley. If you've got such good perimeter players and such good depth with those guys, which if you get a couple of those dominoes to fall your way, you'll have, you having just a serviceable guy there will work. Mizzou was good enough a year ago with Kobe Brown effectively manning the 5 spot. The thing that really sunk them was not having the guard depth and the perimeter depth to play up tempo for 40 minutes. Mizzou was playing with 6.5, 7 players in the rotation by the time they got to the NCAA tournament. If they had 10, but no big guy, they're instantaneously better. Which with what Mizzou has done with adding Grill, Bates, and Tanji, they've done that. So, and again, you can throw the freshmen in with this as well, but it puts a lot of focus on 3 spots in my mind with Matt Cleveland, Isaiah Mosley, and Kobe Brown. I think if you can get 2 of those guys on your roster and of course playing, then you can be a little bit more flexible in that 5 spot. That's just my opinion. You can play small a lot better. You can make teams defend you. You can make them play a track meet for 40 minutes, and that can work. We know that can work. But ideally, you would still like that big guy. So that's kind of my read on it.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we didn't sort of bring up in the changes over the last week is Kaleb Brown entered the transfer portal, which is something that I don't think anybody is surprised by. But if you're talking about like how you construct a roster and you want Kobe Brown in your roster, then the situation sort of becomes where if Kaleb wants to be here, then Kaleb will be here as long as Kobe's here. Essentially you're saying that like Kobe Brown is valuable enough for, essentially making that scholarship somebody that is probably not going to help you next year. And I think that was sort of the reality that settled in for Kaleb probably, and why he ended up kind of choosing to go into the transfer portal. Is the way that the roster was being constructed, it was further reducing his ability to make any kind of impact. Like Dennis Gates brought in two senior guards. So Tanji and Grill, and then a kid in the same class who's a former like top 30, 35 level player, and was a kid who was playing real meaningful minutes for a team who was a 4 seed. So when you sort of look at it that way, I think it became kind of clear for Kaleb that if he wanted to play, he was probably going to have to do it elsewhere. There is a comfort level that he probably felt with Missouri Columbia, having his brother around. I know the Brown family, that they love Columbia. I think that's one of the reasons why we feel the possibility of Kobe coming back is pretty high, because of how he and the family feel about Columbia, Missouri, and their time over the last 4 years. But my first thought when Kaleb hit the portal was whether or not that makes Kobe maybe say, well, maybe originally my thought was if I was going to be a first round draft pick, I should go. But now it's like, if I'm top 45, top 50, those guys are getting guaranteed deals now. As long as I'm going to get a guaranteed deal, as long as I have a guaranteed deal from a team who says that they want to take me and give me a guaranteed deal, then maybe it is time to move on. And I think like that situation just makes it so difficult to figure out what you're going to do with your roster, because of how valuable Kobe Brown made himself to be. If you can land Matthew Cleveland, great. If Isaiah Mosley comes back, great. But neither of those guys does what Kobe Brown does. They're probably closer in playing style to each other, than anybody is to Kobe Brown. So I definitely think like it's going to be interesting because they still want to get a big man. They still want Matthew Cleveland. And then if you get Kobe and Isaiah back and you have a good big man, like I really thought like if Shedrick hits the roster, I really thought like this is a team that could probably be getting some early top 10, top 15 votes. Like that's the kind of level of team that you'd be looking at if you bring all that talent back. But like not having that sort of valuable guy in the middle who can help you protect the rim, who can help rebound, it does sort of lower your ceiling. And I still think, if Kobe, Zay, Cleveland, it's still probably a top 25 team. But what's the goal for next year? And I think if Kobe Brown's coming back, like he probably wants to make sure that they're not just making the tournament, but making a run in the tournament. And that's probably something they have to weigh too. Like they have to make sure that they have the roster depth in certain positions enough to bring that guy back.
I mean, if you're building a team that is disallowed from having anyone taller than 6'8" on it, and you want him to play up tempo, playing 5 out, flowing through the high post, Kobe Brown is the perfect player to do that. And we saw that last year. You take that away and it changes the dynamic a little bit. I go back to the 2009 team with Mike Anderson's 2009 team with DeMauri Carroll and Leo Lyons. Neither of them were traditional big men, but they did things well. They were able to rebound. They were able to generate steals. They were able to score the ball, even though they weren't back to the basket centers. So, Kobe Brown is not exactly like those guys, but he's similar in that he is a small ball 5 and can be, but you have to have everything going real well around that to work. Otherwise, you're going to get killed on the boards, which Mizzou saw quite a bit last year. And you can negate that by just being an absolute turnover menace, which Mizzou at times was, but you need that depth and you need those pieces back. And without an Isaiah Mosley, a Matt Cleveland, or certainly a Kobe Brown, it gets harder to do that. But, I just think that if you get those 3 pieces back, or 2 of the 3 anyway, then I think that really kind of, I don't want to say lessens the need of a prime rim protector. Mizzou would love to have that, but I think it makes it more manageable in not having it.
Yeah. And I do think that knowing whether or not you're getting, Kobe, Matt Cleveland, certainly, we're still very high in what Isaiah Mosley could possibly bring if he's able to come back. Those 3, you want somebody who can be around the rim for him, finish plays. And so I think we're definitely in a period, hopefully over the next week, where we get maybe a clearer picture on what Missouri is going to do in the sort of the Shedrick fallout. I mean, I know that like they have not, been only recruiting Kadin Shedrick. So I think we're just at a point now where we're going to see if there is anybody who is going to hit the portal. I know there's rumors out there of some, some bigs who would certainly help.
And I don't. That my yellow shirt tonight does not represent any teams that those guys may play on. Unlike Caleb Love, I just happen to be wearing yellow today. So.
Yes. Well, I've just got the gray T-shirt on, so that could be anybody. Everybody with their alternate uniforms these days. So we're gonna learn a lot over the next week, and then we'll be back to talk about it. Is there anything else that you wanted to hit on before we get out of here, or did I miss anything?
No, I mean, I thought when you were giving me the lead into Caleb, you had mentioned a guy we haven't talked about a whole lot. I thought that was going to be my opening for Isaiah Mosley, but seeing the time, I don't think that's going to be time enough to really dig into that. Nothing new on that front. We believe that the chances of him coming back are probably greater than not, but that wasn't what I wanted to talk about. I just love talking about Isaiah Mosley and his ability to play basketball.
He's like your basketball bay. Just love that guy.
And I don't remember who it was. I had shared something on Twitter, and another one of my fellow analytics nerds chimed in, and he's like, "This guy's just a freak of analytics nature." And I'm like, he really is.
Well, and when you watch him shoot and stuff, like none of it really makes sense, but it works. I think I remember. We'll just refer to for them as a source. Attended a Missouri basketball practice. He's like, I don't know how these guys win all these games. Like, I don't know how Isaiah Mosley scores the ball. Like, it never looks like the ball's going in, and then it just goes in. It's like, but he's talking about like Missouri last year. He's like, this is not a good roster. It's like, and here they are. Like, I think at that point they had won, 18 or 19 games. He's like, I don't have any idea how they're winning. Like, they're not that good, but
turned out they were pretty good.
I mean, like, I think, and I've talked to another one of my sort of coaching buddies, and he's like, how are they doing it? I'm like, honestly, like, they just have a style of play that works. And like, very rarely was Missouri taking the floor last year, where I think they were the better, more talented team, especially in the SEC. But that's not how you win games. You don't win games on talent. You win games on preparation, shot making, and basically you sort of bending the game to your will. And Missouri just did that more often. Like, it's not complicated. Like, if you're able to make shots, especially in the SEC, like, you can beat so many teams. Like, we talked about like Ole Miss as an example. Like, Ole Miss's roster was talented, but they couldn't shoot. They had like one dude who could make threes, Matthew Morrell, and if he had an off night, they were cooked. And there's just like nothing they could do to score the ball. So
yeah, Mizzou's success so much last year was dependent upon we can score the ball better than you can score against our defense. And it's not the most basketball purist pleasing way, but it was effective. There were times that Mizzou didn't score the ball well, and things got really, really ugly.
Yeah.
The
one gets out of hand and have an off night.
So there's just not much margin for error. But I mean, when Mizzou shot the ball well, there's a really, really, really good chance they were going to win the game, because they could really, really shoot the ball well on those nights. So,
well,
Matt,
they did have that 70 points per game record that everybody always referred to, and where it is like that's not it. That's not the key. 70 points is not the key, because
I think they looked it up there. There would have been something like 12 and 23 had they scored exactly 70 points in every game this season.
I think if you go back, I think they only lost, or they only won one game where they scored less than like 1.08 points per possession.
Really, it was
and that game was the overtime game against Mississippi State, when I want to say they were like 0.96 or 0.95, something like that. So it's, if you're playing 70 possessions and you're scoring 1.1 points per possession, you're going to score more than 70 points. Like, that's right. Like, 1.1 points per possession is difficult to defeat. All right. Well, we've rambled on for an extra like 3 or 4 minutes here, just on talking about Mizzou. We will have all off season to continue to talk about this stuff. But as I've said before, I'm going to continue to kind of do these weekly vid/podcasts until we have a finalized roster. Then we'll probably take some time off. So Missouri didn't have a finalized roster, so I'm back next week, probably with the other Matt. So thanks everybody for tuning in. If you like this podcast, down below is a subscribe button. Smash that. Hit the like button as well. Subscribe to our podcast feed. If you are listening through Apple Podcasts or whatever, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, wherever you download and listen to your podcasts. Rock M Radio is available there. We'd like to thank Fans First Sports Network for their support and our feed. Follow him at Data Mizzou on Twitter. You can follow me at Sam T. Snelling. We retweet all the Mizzou news that comes out of the transfer portal these days. Head on over to rockmnation.com. You can read all up on the most recent updates on the portal tracker. Matt Harris, I think, has a piece coming out on Kadin Shedrick tomorrow. You can find out all the things that kind of went into that move and all the things that are coming. And so we'll be back next week. And until then, thanks for tuning in.